Welcome to MindFULL Live 98. I am your host, Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. It is the 24th of June in the year of our Lord 2022. And we're here, and tonight we're going to be talking about Tobago. We're going to be talking about our sister island, Tobago. Tobago is an interesting place. I like Tobago. I like my sister island, Tobago. It's a lovely place to go. But Tobago has some very interesting politics. And I kind of like their politics too. Their politics seems to run more how you'd hope a democratic system runs. That if they don't like the person who's currently in charge, they decide that they would vote for another person, and they choose another person and they put that person in charge. Grand. I like that about Tobago. The fact that Tobago seems like they aren't beholden to any one party. No one party owns this island. We vote where we see our benefit coming from. Understandable and makes sense. Nisi, I see you. Nisi is everywhere. Yes, Roni should be here, but Roni is missing in action these days. I don't know where Roni is. Roni should be here. And Tobago, in similar tone, Tobago gave PNM Tobago gave PNM all of the seats in a previous election, and then in the last election, Tobago basically took back nearly all the seats from PNM, giving them now to the newly formed party PDP under the leadership of the former head of the Public Service Association, one Mr. Watson, who is currently facing criminal charges for assault of the most heinous nature, but one is innocent until proven guilty. Good night, World Boss Manager over there on TikTok. Yes, yourself, Nisi, yourself. So, yes, this PDP now is in charge of Tobago, but they're not in charge with Duke himself at the helm. He left his understudy, Mr. Farley Augustine, as the head over there in Tobago, and they've had some time in power. Now, I've noticed since they've been in power, some of the people who will fierce supporters in the early seem to be a little less fierce now in their support. Some of the Tobagonian intellectuals that threw their weight behind the PDP during the election season, I've seen some interviews with them, one Mr. Vanas James, etc., and they don't seem to be very impressed with the way the PDP is currently handling Tobago. So we'll see as it progresses. I have hope in PDP. PDP has just what Grenada has just accomplished. PDP has a youthful leadership. PDP now has the leader of Tobago in his 40s. Is it his 40s or his 30s? I can't remember his exact age, but Mr. Farley Augustine is a young man, young and sprightly fellow. So he is there at the forefront. Similar to Grenada, they have youth in their leadership. Now, he just read a budget yesterday, because not only is he the Tobago House of Assembly Chief Secretary, he is the Finance Secretary too. He is in charge of the money. So, let's look over to Tobago and see how this money goes. Now, let's understand something about Tobago before we jump in. Tobago is our sister isle. The nature of how Tobago runs, they run on serious deficit, knowing that they get a lot of their bounty from the national coffers of Trinidad and Tobago. So Tobago's budgets have typically run as such. And I remember reading Mr. Farley Augustine right before the election, when in one of his interviews, he was speaking about his plans for Tobago, and he was saying one of the problems Tobago faces is that in Tobago, the chief employer is the government. is the state, and that's not a sustainable way to run a country. That's not how you get upward mobility in the people in the country. They don't move upward in their employment generally by only being employed by the state. And if you want to advance your country, you have to figure out ways to encourage people into their own kind of entrepreneurship, into doing their own activities separate from the state, encourage activity within the market. And I heard him speak about such things, and it gave me hope. I was like, yes, these young people are listening. So yes, on that backdrop, we're going to take in his budget. Bago requests $3.97 billion for 2022-2023. The Progressive Democratic Patriots led Bago House of Assembly is requesting an allocation of $3.97 billion from central government to manage the island's affairs for fiscal 2022-2023. Big bucks. In announcing the figure on Thursday during his first budget presentation at the Assembly, Legislature Scarborough Chief Secretary Falia Russing said it was predicated on an anticipated national budget of $57.4 billion, an increase of $1.9 billion in fiscal 2023. He said he hopes the figure will also reflect 6.9% of the national budget, in keeping with the upper end of the Dispute Resolution Committee's recommendation. Today's minimum allocation of the national budget is 4.03% as mandated by the DRC. Okay, so what this DRC, this Dispute Resolution Committee, what that was about was Tobago wanted more money. Tobago wanted more money, a bigger slice of the national pie. They found they wanted more money every year for their budget. A committee was formed, and from this committee, a decision was made, okay, we can peg Tobago to a percentage of the national budget. And the percent, I believe, ranged from 4% at the minimum, I believe, to 7% at the maximum, a range of percentages. And surprise, surprise, PDP is asking for the maximum range of that budget, at the top range up there. In fiscal 2021-2022, the former PNM-led THA administration had requested $4.7 billion from central government, which included $2.075 billion for recurrent expenditure, $264 million for capital expenditure, and $18 million for the URP program. But it received only $2.35 million, which accounted for 4.5% of the national budget. So last year, Tobago only received $2.35 billion. I don't think this year they are going to get much more of that pie. I don't think this year they are going to get a bigger slice of that pie. They got 2.35 last year. They were asking for 3.9 basically for. I don't think Mr. Inbate is going to approve any $4 billion going across to Tobago. Now, I find Tobago to be such an odd place in how their budgets are formed. I love my sister island, but it's just such an odd place in how their budgets are formed. Tobago's income for the year was calculated, I don't think it's in this article, the income for the year was calculated at $200 and something million. Can someone explain to me how it makes sense to run a budget that is magnitudes higher than your income? How does that add up? How does that add up? How is that a sustainable practice? And with this, Tobago is asking for autonomy. They're asking for more independence in how they manage their business. They want to get a little more separation from Trinidad and Tobago. But I find when I look at this arrangement that we have here, where Tobago makes $200 million, but Tobago gets to the tune or asks for the tune of $4 billion, and they get $2 billion at least. I find that arrangement sounds like an arrangement where Tobago is set up as a specialized zone in our country. If you tell me that Tobago is set up to be set apart there, unique in its corner, and we're paying extra money out of our coffers, out of the coffers of Trinidad and Tobago, the country, we're paying that extra money, although Tobago doesn't pay us back in profit, we're paying that money to keep their unique and special for us. Then that could make sense and you could get me to do that argument. But if you're telling me we're paying that, and then Tobago is seeking their own autonomy, where they could basically paddle their boat on their own, that kind of doesn't add up. Wasn't it the PDP leader block a foreign investor that could have provided more jobs for Tobagonians? Well, yeah. Let's get in further into it. On this occasion, Augustine said of the $3.97 billion that is being requested, $3.07 billion will be for recurrent expenditure and $900 million development expenditure. The Unemployment Relief Program and Community-Based Environmental Protection and Enhancement Program will receive $59.59 million and $53.17 million respectively, he added. Wow. So, under the previous PNM, URP received $18 million. And now, under the PDP, they're requesting that URP receive $59.59, basically $60 million, and another $53.17 million for CPEP. Wow. And this, I think, is reverse from what I would have hoped the PDP would go down the line of. If you're looking to make money for a country, I'm not against relieving people from their unemployed situation. But if we're talking about making money for our country, if we're saying our country needs to make money, the country of Tobago needs to make some money, they need to up their game. They're making $200 million, they're requesting to spend $4 billion. They need to up their game in terms of how much money they make. Does expanding URP and CPEP increase the possibility of your country making more money? Is that a possibility that increases when you expand URP and CPEP? I kind of don't think so. And here's the thing with the URP and CPEP programs. I don't have a problem with them. They're essential where they're essential. But us in Trinidad and Tobago, if we're being honest, we know that many of these URP and CPEP programs are specialized programs to help the friends of politicians. If you work the campaign route, you are assured a URP job at some point in time. So, with them having just won an election, you could wonder if part of the reason they want to boost the funding inside of URP and CPEP is to return some favors. And here's the thing. The nature of what the PDP is already doing in governance does not make that seem like an impossible reality. The PDP has already gotten themselves into some problems by hiring one of the people who was an independent commenter who really spoke up on their behalf in his neutral tone. When they won, they hired his brother as a secretary and then him as an executive under that secretary. Tobago Chamberhead Winford James must go. Head of Tobago Business Chamber Martin George has called for the appointment of political analyst Dr. Winford James as Deputy Chairman of Tobago's Studley Park Enterprises Limited board to be revoked, given his closeness to Tobago House of Assembly Secretary of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development, Trevor James. George said Dr. James can serve on another board, but it must be outside the remit of the Division of Infrastructure. So right now, and let me explain what's going on right now before we get further into it. Right now, what's going on, Dr. Winford James is serving on the board in a state organization, in a state company, right under the purview of his brother. That isn't proper. That isn't how you do things in propriety. If you want things to not look like, you're moving corrupt. It's just not what you do. Now, when this news came out, Mr. Augustine came out there and he said, they're going to investigate this matter. They're going to look into it. And then the brother wrote a defense for the brother. James defends James. Tobago House of Assembly Infrastructure Secretary Trevor James last Friday submitted a 3-page document to Chief Secretary Farley Augustine seeking to justify the appointment of Dr. Winford James on the Studley Park Enterprises Limited board. This comes following calls for Winford James to be removed as he is the brother of Trevor James. In an interview with the Express at the official residence of the Chief Secretary, Augustine said he had received from the line secretary a justification, a 3-page letter about the thoughts behind Dr. James' position on the board. And the thing is, this is the very problem with someone hiring someone who is the brother working under the brother. You don't want a brother to be writing a letter of recommendation as to why he should hire his brother. It just does not seem right. And now, if we see that the PDP is already engaging in activities such as this, and they're willing to do things like this, and the investigation into this matter, I have no idea what stage that investigation is at. As far as I know, both Jameses are still in the positions that they were placed in. So if we see that the PDP is willing to do that in these kinds of situations, what are we to assume about what's going to happen with the URP and CPEP bonuses? And I mean, as I said before, in Trinidad and Tobago, we are aware about the reputation that CPEP and URP gangs have. We are aware about the reputation, about where the majority of the money goes when you hear talk about CPEP and URP. And if that is the case, how are you supposed to engender trust when people see that you are aiming in the direction of boosting by magnitudes? Bear in mind, the PNM's allocation, as I said, the PNM's previous allocation was 18 million for the URP program. Their allocation is basically $60 million. That's a lot more money. And where is all of that money going to go? Augustine noted the most recent data provided by the Economic Management Research Unit of the Division of Finance, Trade and the Economy stated that in the last decade, between 2011 and 2021, Tobago experienced 7 years of decline in GDP, to the point where the island's GDP in 2021 was equivalent to that of 2011. This means that the economic pie did not increase. So he is admitting what is the famous quotes, there must be no impropriety or the appearance of impropriety. I can't remember the exact quote, but it sounds familiar. The very appearance of impropriety. I can't remember it, but yes, that's true. And if he is willing to admit that Tobago's pie, the economic pie, is not increasing, then is increasing the labor load on the state more likely to increase that economic pie? Is that an avenue that is going to make the pie get bigger? I don't see how it is. And if you spend more in that direction, tying up the free labor in Tobago inside of state-sponsored make work, how does that help? The data, Augustine said, also indicates that the state sector was the largest contributor to Tobago's GDP in 2021. Surprise anyone? Accounting for approximately 48% of the island's GDP. The second largest contributor was the finance, insurance, real estate, and business services sector, accounting for 28%, while the tourism sector accounted for just about 10% of GDP in 2021. So Tobago, which is supposed to basically be our specialist tourism isle, only gets 10% of their $200 million, which is sorely lacking compared to their $4 billion requested spend. They only get 10% of that from tourism. 10%. Tobago's tourism industry is unsustainable. Tobago's tourism industry at this present stage seems to obviously not be capable of allowing Tobago to survive on it. 10% of 200 million is about 20 million. Are you telling me Tobago basically makes a couple 20-something million off of tourism? What is that? They should be investing in things that would make the island more profitable. I fully agree, and I do not see how URP and CPAP is going to do that. He said the agriculture and manufacturing sectors were relatively small, contributing collectively about 2% of Tobago's GDP in 2021, with agriculture's contribution amounting to a mere 18.7 million. Augustine said, read accurately, Tobago's GDP speaks loudly to the continued underperformance of the Tobago economy and urgent need for monetary allocations to focus heavily on productivity, growth, income generation, and the development of a competitive export capacity. Thank God the PDP won that election, he said. Now, I don't know what in his budget is exactly going to directly hit on that. I don't know what in the PDP's budget is going to increase the amount of money that Tobago makes. Now, there is some promise that I saw there. Some promise for both Trinidad and Tobago. Benefits going both directions if this idea does pull through. Because I saw that Tobago has a plan to deliver ground produce flour to us by September. Let me see if I could find that. Yes, alternative flour supply from Tobago from September. The Tobago Agribusiness Development Company will be supplying alternative flour in partnership with Novo Farms Limited by September. THA Secretary of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment and Sustainable Development, Nathisha Charles Pantin, announced this virtually during Wednesday's post-Executive Council news conference from the Victor E. Bruce Financial Complex in Scarborough. On Tuesday and Wednesday, national flour mills and Nutrimix announced the wheat prices going up. Charles Pantin said already an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, has been signed. The idea is to supply flour not only to Tobago but throughout TT. Novo Farms, they are already ready in Trinidad, and in the month of July they will be supplying flour to Trinidad. TADCO would come on board, and of course the processing would be done in Tobago. So we are appealing to farmers to continue planting and up your supplies, because we want your cassava and dashings to process alternative flour. That is a beautiful idea. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if it were possible that Trinidad could get a boost? Hey, Halley 59. Wouldn't it be wonderful if it were possible that Trinidad could get a boost in supplemental flour from right Tobago? Our alternative flour that we mix into the wheat flour to, I don't know how many of you know this, but if you have a diesel engines can run on petrol too, on kerosene. And especially when you look at some of those older diesel engines and you look at them at the gas station, you see them doing the little switcheroo. Because the cost of diesel and the cost of kerosene is noticeably different. So you mix in some kerosene and you mix in some diesel and you get a nice little cheaper mix going on there. How much has flour risen to? I don't know for sure the price. Now, I've seen the Minister of Trade admonishing some retailers and very angry, pointing out that some retailers instantly raised prices on stock that didn't actually have a price increase. If they had a stock of flour that was there from last month, that flour is the price of last month's flour, and some of them are already increasing it. I saw the Minister of Trade warning about that and saying that they know of some of the retail outlets that are doing that. Not anymore, though. Diesel and kerosene is really close in price now. Kerosene prices gone up. Wow, I did not know that. Things tough. If petrol oil expensive, things really tough. But yeah, maybe we could be doing that with our alternative flours, because as I pointed out last night, one of the problems with the alternative flours is they are gluten free. Now, if you are one of those really modern people and you're into your chia seeds and whatever nonsense, gluten free might be exciting for you. But if you're a Trini who likes your roti to kind of stay together and don't want everything you make out of flour to be all crumbly, you like a bit of gluten, so you might want to mix it in. And if it is possible that we could get cheap reasonably priced alternative flour from like Bago and allow us to have a cheaper mix into the wheat flour that we get from foreign, and that over time morphs our taste, that will be wonderful. Although the flour has risen, it is still cheaper than the flour alternatives. Yes, I am aware. I saw the prices of cassava flour and some of those other alternatives. They were like gold powder. They were like gold dust. That still isn't close to being anything competitive or helpful in reducing price out here. That's one of the things with wheat. Wheat is so plentiful that it makes making flour a lot cheaper. That's just one of the benefits of wheat. So maybe because ground provision grows pretty well in our climate and our conditions, maybe if we have something like a national milling ground produce into flour, it would encourage farmers to up their production in ground produce, and maybe we'd be producing enough at a scale enough that it would get cheap. Oh gosh, they bust the petrol secret. Shucks, tough. That's tough. But yeah, so what you all think about the Tobago budget? Let me know. How you all see this? You all think Tobago realistic in doing that? You all think that makes sense, that Tobago makes about 200 and something million, 200, let's say 300 million, let's put it up to 300 million, and they request $3.9 billion for their budget, and Trinidad pays that out to them, and they go ahead and use that money to give chunks of it to URP. Does that make sense? Is that a fiscally wise idea? I kinda don't find so. What you all think? I'm sorry, no way. Nope seems to be the general consensus so far. I find that a hard thing. I find it really hard to justify. If you are asking for 3.9 billion and for 4 billion, and you're telling me the 4 billion, you're going to take 60 million from that and directly invest XYZ into the tourism industry. We're going to do this with the tourist industry, that with the tourist industry, invest here, remove taxes there, encourage development here, encourage encourage investment here. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You up the amount of you increase the pie, the size of the pie, as they said, but what's the point in this? Have you considered the fact that it's a new administration? The old did crap for 21 years. Okay, I could understand that argument. But I don't understand. What I don't understand if you're saying the old did crap for 21 years, I don't understand why you need to do some crap to help fix their crap. Like, if you're saying the former party did crap, alright, and you need to solve the crappiness they left, how do you solve that crappiness? By tripling, quadrupling the budget of CPEP and URP. How does that solve the crappiness of 21 years? I don't understand. They should have a vision for the money so people know what they are working towards. Exactly. And we know what URP does. Like, URP is a known entity in Trinidad and Tobago. I keep mentioning regularly, I mention this, I am in the construction industry. I have watched side by side a private project and a URP project going on. You could watch someone build a house in a lot of land before URP finishes the box drain across the 50-foot expanse in front of the same lot of land. The entire house could be finished on the land before URP finishes the 50 feet of box drain. We know URP, and here's the thing. I don't have a problem with URP in and of itself. I know personally there are many people in the country who may have been saved literally by URP at some point in time. I understand that. But I'm saying if you're talking about advancing your country and increasing, one of the things that Tobago desperately needs, I believe the THA is not getting that request. Of course they're not getting that request. One of the things the THA desperately needs is to increase the amount of money they make, increase the income of Tobago. I don't see how anything in that budget points in that direction. That's basically TNT politics. Do more crap to fix previous crap. Yeah. And I don't like it. No use in spending excessive money with little of no returns. Little to no returns. Organizations like URP need to be more efficient and effective. The number will inflate it to the upper limit of the DRC. Oh, well, I would assume that. I am not denying that very likely they're doing a big ask. They're asking for more than they want so that they would get less. I would still like to know, though, in this big ask, where they decided to inflate is in URP and CPEP. In the big ask, when you say it's a negotiator's budget, in that budget, part of the plan is that if it so be and I get exactly what I ask for, it will be the perfect thing I'm asking for. So I will suppose this negotiator's budget that is inflated, they're asking for more money than they actually want. I would suppose within this budget is the perfection to make Tobago into paradise. Do you see the perfection to make Tobago into paradise by inflating URP and CPEP? That's where they went. That's the direction they went in. They didn't have any revolutionary idea. Their idea wasn't making a solar farm for Tobago necessarily and making it into an eco-tourist attraction or something. It wasn't even like that. I'll take some of those far out ideas more than I would take URP and CPEP because that's not advancing the economy. And if you're inflating it to get your negotiators' budget going, you know you're making the big ask, you're asking for 4 billion, but you know you could survive with 2 billion. Well, at least in the 4 billion budget, show me what you would do if I did give you the 4 billion. You're showing me that you would do nothing sensibly with it. I don't get it. Someone needs to explain it to me. Because it doesn't add up. And I think it would be very unfortunate if Tobagonians, any Tobagonian, relieve themselves of the shackles of of being super loyal and permanently loyal to PNM. They remove those shackles and then they shackle themselves onto permanent loyalty with this new party. You do not owe these politicians a thing. You could have voted for PDP. You could stand up and proudly say, I voted for PDP, and then you could look back in the next month and say they're doing nonsense and point directly at the nonsense they're doing and say you need to stop doing that nonsense. I am waiting to see that also positive radiation. That's why this is a bit early in terms of the discussion of their budget. I would like to see it broken down a bit more, and they chew on some of the suggestions. I saw they're talking about the orange economy and the blue economy, and when I see these kinds of words, it kind of annoys me sometimes, because they seem like United Nations, international relations, university talk that you learn somewhere and you stick in there because it sounds good in developmental pages. But the orange economy, the idea is that it focuses on the creative industry. They're going to put in some focus on the creative industry. I would like to see how exactly they're going to do that. How are they going to focus more on the creative industry? How are you going to invest in it? The creative industry is a unique thing. It's a unique thing. The creative industry kind of needs financial support because some creative endeavors are difficult to monetize, but it could add value to your culture. However, because of that, the creative industry could end up just like a URP style something where the government is paying a lot of money and getting zero actual value in return. That's the difficulty with that kind of industry. So when I hear them talking about they're going to invest in the orange economy, I am even more worried too, because the creative industry is a difficult thing to manage in and of itself. So that's another area I would like to see fleshed out. I would like to hear the details of them going in depth in how exactly you're going to do this whole orange economy business, and then the blue economy where they're talking about using exploiting their marine resources and preserving it, etc. I think that is essential for Tobago. Personally, I think that whole no man's land to Nile and pool business there, I think that's probably one of Tobago's strongest selling point, and Tobago needs to get very important in terms of conserving that and maximizing the use of it. Tobago's cultural space is different to Trinidad. I agree. Everyone's cultural space is different. That's not saying anything. Central Trinidad's cultural space is different to North Trinidad's. South cultural space is different to the East. Everyone's cultural space is different. That's not saying much. I would just like to see how they're going to do it. Because, yes, as we know, Tobago has the goat racing and the Heritage Festival, etc., etc. I would just like to see how it's going to be done, because you could spend a lot of money and invest in the old time wedding for Tobago and spend millions on it every year and preserve it pristine, and then do it in a manner that no one cares to come and look at it anymore. So it becomes just a job that the government pays 100 people to put on every year. The government pays 100 people, they put on that, nobody comes to look at it, and it wastes money. That could be a reality. So I just like to see how they do it. Will that reef gone through? That's just a nice party spot. I know the reef has been severely damaged. I wouldn't say it's gone through, and it being a nice spot is all it needs to be. That's all tourism is, a nice spot. And make it as nice a spot as you can make it with what is left there. Good night, Jason Maskell over on Facebook. First, the Facebook viewers seem not very interested in commenting usually. I know it's me over on Facebook. Most of the live chat happens over on TikTok, but be free to jump into the chat over on Facebook as we go through these Mindful Lives. Now, this is the last one for the week. We're going to restart, catch back up with each other next week, Monday, for the next Mindful Live. Do tune in. It starts usually 9:30 p.m. barring technical or otherwise difficulties. All right. That's all I have for now in the Tobago edition of the Mindful Life. Anyone has anything more to add or ask before we dive out? The reef is Tobago's jewel. I agree. The reef is Tobago's jewel. Unfortunately, the jewel is becoming severely damaged. Let me run over there and comment. Nisi, you are a trooper. A true one. It really is Tobago's jewel, and it's unfortunate that it's becoming so damaged that it's nearly unrecognizable to people who would have known it in its heyday. You go back to Tobago and your heart would hurt. But I think regardless of that, you can't say, all right, it's already lost, so forget about it from there. I don't think so. You have to save it regardless of whichever stage it's at. You have to try your best to hold back from that point forward. You can only work from that point forward, and you stop from that point, hold it as much as you could, and preserve as much as you could, because that is quite a series there. I think Tobago, if it markets itself correctly, you see that combination of the no man's land, the Nyland pool, and the reef, etc. out there, combined with the cultural experience and the nice round Tobago view and view of the little rainforest, etc. Tobago has so much to offer. It's just to market themselves correctly. The money should be spent to secure it. I agree. Listen, if Tobago came to us and said they have a 4 billion, if Tobago comes, if the THA comes and says they have a $10 billion budget, but in that $10 billion budget, they have the restoration of all of the reefs, an attempt to restore the reefs, the restoration of the historical sites. Oh, you know what? I'm glad you said that, because look at the way the money could be spent. This is an article. I'm going to pull this up. If you're not over on the YouTube live and you hear me reading the articles and you're wondering where are these articles, you can feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer, over on YouTube. The live shows live over on YouTube there also, and you can go back there and catch the live if you missed it. You can catch it over on YouTube again, and you get to see the articles as I read it too. So there's that benefit. Feel free to subscribe, Nathan Springer, over on YouTube. Alright, let's check this article out before we go. Tobago's historic artifacts being stolen, sold for scrap iron. The Tobago House of Assembly is planning to establish an antiquities unit to more effectively use Tobago's archaeological artifacts as part of its tourism product, after finding that people have been stealing artifacts either to sell or use in their own homes. Some have even turned old historic sugar boiling pots into plant pots in their yards. Yes, that's what I was reading here. Positive radiation, that's what I was reading. They did allocate funds to open up this antiquities unit. Now, if in the budget I saw that Tobago had $10 billion towards preserving their antiquities and promoting the island's tourism and rehabilitating the reef here, I may have marched on Port of Spain in support of $10 billion to do that, because I could understand where the returns will come from. If Tobago asks for $10 billion to create a bigger mill, to mill more cassava and dasheen, because their interest is becoming the number one supplier of alternative flour to the Trinidad market, I am in full support of that, because that's something that could have a return on investment. But when you tell me you're asking for all those billions to pay European CPEP, I don't have a problem with people working European CPEP. Everyone needs to work, and if you get a job, they're grand. It's just that I don't see the return on investment for such a thing. Visitors should not be allowed to remove anything from reefs, especially the corals. Agreed. And I believe that is part of the rules. But when you have a country, you see, this is part of it. I heard some people say this in the comparison of, for example, Tobago with a country like Barbados. Tobago has a big brother, a very wealthy big brother, that pays all the bills for them. A very wealthy big brother that pays all the bills for them. While Barbados has to make sure that they make their own money. So Barbados takes their tourism very seriously. But because Tobago has 10% of its GDP coming from tourism, and they don't need that because they make 200 million and they just write a budget and send it down to Trinidad and say, send up the paper. Because of that, they don't need to take their tourism as seriously, and I think probably because of that, that may have an effect in how seriously Tobago takes even the preservation of some of their historic and tourist attractions. They need reef police. I could agree with that too. Invest in reef police. I don't mind. But URP them could be trained to work in the mills. You relate King Kaka and take them out of the government system. Nathan, I agree with you. Tobagonians are too dependent on Trinidad. Here's the thing. I agree URP could be trained to work in the mills, but that's not the government's job. You don't take URP and send them there. The government. See, that's the difficulty, because the government is going to own the mill too. So good luck with the mill and the government and their running up of the mill. Government, it would be joy. All right. I'm looking to head out there. Any more questions or statements before I jump out? And we will see each other again in the next Mindful Live. Nothing is being taken from the reef anymore. You can't even come out the boat on the reef. Well, I don't totally mind that. Let the reef rehabilitate a little bit. The reef needs to catch himself. He's struggling out there. These are living organisms. They're dying, and allow them to catch themselves for a little bit. I don't totally mind that at all. All right. Thank you very much to 70 plus employed Tobagonians working with the THE. I don't know about 70 plus, almost no. Oh, you mean 70%? Yes, that is true. That's widely known. Tobago has nearly no private sector. And that's very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. And it only works that way because they depend on Trinidad. And in the same tone, Tobagonians ask for self-autonomy, for more autonomy. And I think in order to do that, they need to change some of those dynamics. What about the oils Trinidad getting from Tobago water? Well, I just read about a bit of oil that was recently found in Tobago's water. Now, here's part of the kicks with this. Some of the oil that Tobago claims in their water. I remember when Mr. Duke was saying that if Tobago leaves Trinidad and Tobago as a union, they will have some oil on their own, and that's Tobago's oil. Here's the thing. The way how international law works, if Trinidad and Tobago were to split as a union, as a country, Tobago's waters, the waters that Tobago would be able to claim, would shrink. And that oil that Tobago claims would actually end up being Barbados's oil. So, the oil that Tobago has, to a large extent, is our oil only because we are an hour. Tobago by itself may not even have access to that oil. So, yes, there is oil in, technically speaking. There's no oil in Tobago waters, really. There's oil in Trinidad and Tobago waters. And the next part in that is, even if there may be oil in the waters there, the work to process it and get the money out of it almost always comes from Trinidad and from Trinidad's side. I am not saying here, as in some kind of island versus island, Trinidad is more useful than Tobago. I don't think so. That's not my belief. My statement is based on how Tobago runs its affairs. If Tobago would like to become more autonomous, then they need to dial back on their budget and increase the amount of money they make. That's all to it. If they like the setup they have right now, then you like the setup of being under the Trinidad nanny state, as it were. Do you agree that the THA should pay AATT to keep the airport open till 2 a.m.? Yes, I agree with that. I think Tobago should be putting much more effort to becoming a better tourist attraction. I think Tobago should be doing a lot more of that. Nearly anything they could do to boost themselves as a tourist attraction. I don't think Tobago is even enough of a tourist attraction to Trinidad. Over the pandemic, we saw how much of an attraction Tobago could be to Trinidadians. Lots of Trinidadians holiday in Tobago. I think we could up those numbers. We could up the number of Trinidadians that spend their money right in Tobago. Any Trini who go in Barbados, Tobago job is to attract them to Tobago instead. Even the inter-Caribbean tourism, you're looking for that Tobago. And I think Tobago has the capability to do that. Because Tobago has the benefit of the big brother Trinidad, where with the money with the bright lights, so you have that kind of atmosphere. Tobago could do a lot more. I think they could do a lot more. They just need the creative thinking. And I was hoping, and I am hoping, that this present younger administration has some of that. Because one of my complaints that I regularly make about the PNM government is they're the old money government. They're the government of the establishment. Whoever was there before, they're in good with the PNM by and large. Now this new government, I would hope, would be able to be a little more outside the box. Throw ideas out there. Let some of these young entrepreneurs take a crack at some of these problems. Trust me, there are many young people out there with ideas bursting at the seams of their brains, wanting to get a try to use them. And I don't think they need government help necessarily. They need no government obstruction in it. And there has been, Trinidad and Tobago typically has been very obstructionist when it comes to entrepreneurship and people putting their own ideas forward. The WePay guy, the fintech guy, local Trini man, started his company in Trinidad and Tobago, sent his company to Jamaica to headquarter now because Trinidad is difficult to do business in. So we know that, and I think Tobago on the tourism side needs to focus on that too, making Tobago very easy for anyone wanting to do that tourism entrepreneurship side, making it very easy for them to do just that. All right. Thank you very much for tuning in. That was Mindful Live. I am your host, Nathan Springer. Thank you for tuning in. The next Mindful Live will be Monday night at 9:30. The Mindful Lives usually run every weeknight at around 9:30. Be sure to tune in. Head over to my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer on YouTube, and you can catch up on the previous lives. This is Mindful Live 98. So yes, the suggestion is there were 97 before that. Yes. And there are also other videos there. Take them in if you are so interested, and I will see you all again in the live, in the chat, where you can jump in the chat and say something if you so please, to next week, Monday. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. So Tobago should look for more regional flights. Fully agreed, positive radiation. You're talking my language. Have a good weekend, everyone. Peace.